Morning all. Well, today you find me at on the banks of the Brisbane River in Mandalay, and I just want to say a few words after the overall project's been described to you, or the structure of the assignment, about the virtual shore walks and a little bit of background information to help you interpret some of the things that I say when I'm wandering around the shore. So we've got some video shots I did over a series of days at different shores on Moreton Bay, so 7 days, 4 sites. So it basically covers a neap to spring sequence, as you'll see in the scale of the shore as we progress in the series. And I just grabbed a camera, often a companion, and then wandered around the shore, seeing what I could see, not having really interrogated these shores much before, but I found it very interesting. Now your task now is to work with your team, liaise with your tutor, view the videos, discuss and identify a tractable research question. It can be on any particular topic. It doesn't have to be biological, it could be biophysical. There might be a comparison between shores or something within shores, something that you find interesting on the way through. I'm pretty excited to find out what you come up with. I've certainly got new questions after visiting these shores, and I look forward to doing more of these sort of walk and talks in the future. It's quite interesting to walk along the shore just on your own, looking at what's there without a herd of people behind you. You see some different things. Also, it gives you the chance every now and then to pause, stick the camera down, and stand back and see what happens while you're away from the camera. And there's a few sequences about that. There's also initially I was learning to use GoPro on the way through, right? So the first video sequences, couple of video sequences, I bought a head strap thing, and then worked out that I couldn't actually see what I was looking at, and so that was pretty silly. So I actually held the head strap. By I think the third shore visit, I'd bought a selfie stick of all things. I never thought I'd buy a selfie stick, and started using those and got a little bit more sophisticated. So some of it's a bit wobbly, sorry about that, but hopefully you'll enjoy these things. Now I recommend when you're looking at these, treat them in sequence. So I visited Manly first, then Redcliffe, then Nudgee, and then Wellington Point. And as I progress through these series of videos, I do refer to earlier videos, so it's really best to look at them in sequence. And yeah, I think that's the best way. I try and make internal corrections as well sometimes. So you'll see some text associated with some things I'm identifying. Anthony O'Toole's kindly put those in little captions onto the figure. Sometimes those are corrections, so you'll see that I'm saying not something or other exclamation mark, like I got it wrong. Then here's the correct name for it, or at least as far as I can tell from the resource I have available at the time. So Manly was the first show I looked at, went down with Dave Brewer. We had a parked over here in this area here, and then wandered down from this pavilion onto the shore and basically explored almost just this area here. It was only a matter of 100 meters, 120 meters, I suppose. It was a neap tide, something similar to this. This is a little bit lower, but a neap tide. Then we explored some sand, some artificial sort of deposited sand there, some natural sediments as well. So, and a little bit of mangrove talk as well. Then the next day I went to Sutton's Beach without any particular assistance. It was a young child called Kobe, helped me one stage. Was very, very good at hunting crabs. We had a little look at the sand shore here, which is a more natural environment. The sand's been transported there by natural processes, I think. It's highly modified above that. There's a seawall rather than mangroves and things. So again, highly modified shore of Moreton Bay. After that, I explored this little bit of rock platform here and find some grass that seems to be intertidal, and then have a little bit of a trundle up. Where's my mouse gone? Trundle up here, and then just look and talk about some of the shore features over here. After that, I got back in the car and drove south a little bit, came across a place called Scott's Point, looked fascinating, had to go look at it. And so the last sequences in the Redcliffe video is basically about Scott's Point. The other thing I would say on the way through, when you listen to yourself doing videos all the time, you understand where your little verbal twitches are. Mine is basically, so I'll say basically a lot. I'll say so a lot. And yeah, anyway, you'll pick that up on the way through, no doubt. Naji was great. Went to Naji with Tamara. Tamara is, works with us in Centre for Marine Science, or Centre for Marine Solutions at UQ. So go see Tamara if you want to sign up for volunteering activity and that sort of stuff. We've worked together for quite a few years now, and we had a wander together down on the shore, parked in the car park here, and then basically, there you go, basically, right? And then we trundled down here all the way out to low water. This is much larger shore. This tide depicted here on near maps. This is always in these images. North is to the top of the page. And these images, these near map images I'm using, will show you that I was trying to select one where the tide was out, right? And you'll see these series of sand waves we walk over. But really interesting shore. I'd seen it. I fly over it a lot. Hadn't actually been down and had a big diggle around in it. And yeah, I found that a very interesting trip. Quite unusual. You'll see in the video. A little bit long, but hopefully some things that interest you and maybe generate a few questions you can ask. Wellington Point, this last one, I did this on 2 separate shoots, both of my daughter Hannah, one on the 6th, I think it was, and one on the 8th. 8th was the spring tide, so the tide was way out down here somewhere. You can see from the scale of the cars in the car park here at Wellington Point, and we wandered down from the slipway here across the rock, across this. This is basalt, it's a lava outflow, and it's been lateritized, which means it's been enriched with ions, so it looks very red, and that iron seems to be an important part of the story around here. Then we wandered down the shore, meandering around, down into zones where there's lots of algae, sporadic corals, quite exciting stuff, lots and lots of macroalgae, so really lovely place. And then wander back up, trying to avoid the seagrass, over the sand spit here, which is if you haven't done the walk, then it's well worth doing. And then onto the shore down here, where we attempted some images of crabs, of some of the burrowing crabs there. Basically there you go, basically again, but basically they were fiddler crabs and also some mud skippers, and so that was in this area down here. So, I mean, the secret when you're starting to work on a shore, and you'll probably visit shores when life gets back to normal, look at the current directions and velocities it's sort of suffering. So that's going to drive the sediment structure, or it's going to drive the erosion forces on rocky shores, and where life can occur. Look at the historical spectrum of sediment transport processes. So if you dig down, a sediment shore is by its nature a depositional shore. So if you dig down, you're looking at a sequence of deposition. So if you can look at the particle size, you go down, the nature of the sediments, you're looking at the history of what's affected that site. That can be important to the way you interpret it, or the way you frame questions about it. Look for signs of biological interactions with sediments. Now, seldom are the biological interactions with rocky shores directly, unless they're at very long time scales, like grazing snails licking rocks, wearing them away. If that's a hard rock, that's going to be a long-term process. But if you've got something like a limestone, then of course, if you can secrete acids, you can bore holes in it. If you're licking away, limestone's fairly soft, so you'll erode it. But with soft sediments, often you can see signs of biological interactions where there are holes dug, where there's sediment thrown up onto the surface, for example, and you'll see some of that in the videos. Also, have a look at your shore. Make sure you understand where you are at the within the tidal regime. Are you in neaps? Are you in springs? What's going on at your location? This will influence how you interpret the shore as well. And then above all, prioritise your safety. Wear appropriate footwear. You'll see in the video that where Hannah's helping me look at it under a couple of rocks, remove some stuff. She's wearing heavy gloves. It's a good idea. Wear a hat, long sleeve shirt, all the usual stuff, sunscreen, and take care when you're on the shore. So a little bit about shores and sediment transport now. So I'm pretty keen on this topic in terms of interpreting shore. Here we have a lovely wave in a oligotrophic system because there's no nutrients in the water, and you can see it's entrained a lot of sand, which is being transported by the wave energy. So the energy status of a shore is really interesting to look at. And one of the key things to ask yourself is You know, where's the direction of fetch? Where's the principal direction of wind? How long does the wind have over water to establish effective sort of swells to strike that shore? And are there any structures on the shore that might interfere with that and interfere with current flow? Because those will then interact with the particles. So here we've got a particle size range diagram. This is coarse sand. Coarse sand has a diameter of 2 millimeters as the upper limit. See on the diagram here, basically coarse sand. Before you get, after that, you get into gravels. So sand is this fraction down to quite small particles, about 64 microns, the lower range of the sand distribution. So below that, silts and clays, and they have their own particular properties. And you can see the marked difference in the scale here of these what they call fine earth fractions, and these are things that are largely affected by the beach processes you're going to be looking at. So here's a very basic diagram. I did this back many millions of years ago, and it basically describes the major ways the particles can get transported along by a current. Here we've got the sediment, and here there's a diagram depicting some particles of different sizes, all the same density. So the larger particle under this stable current flow might roll along, for example. Slightly larger than that, it might bounce or saltate, that is, like, occasionally jump up into the water column but then come back down again as it loses energy, and then so move down as part of the bed load with the rolling particles. Even finer particles may be suspended in the water, so they may be carried along up in the water column, and only when water velocity slows down will they fall out. Now this relationship is really for a single current velocity and a single particle spectrum. But there's a diagram developed by someone called Hjulström, and I don't know the background to it, look it up. But the Hjulström diagram is something I mentioned a few times, and it looks a bit scary when you first have a look at it. You notice a few things. You've got diameter of grain down here in millimeters, and this is you can see it's a log scale. Important, something to know that. And then here's the water velocity in centimeters per second, and again it's a log scale, so very much a compressed diagram. Now this is a tale of several stories, all right? So this line here describes when particles can be picked up, and it's quite unusual. You probably immediately pick why it's an unusual line. Here's the amount of energy required to remove a cobble, and a cobble's like 10 centimeters across, all right? If you look down here at the scale, millimeters, 100, 10 centimeters. So you need a water velocity of around about coming on for 100 centimeters to over a meter per second. 2 to 3 meters per second to actually move the cobble around. And if you look here, then clay is still, when you've moved the cobble, clay is still sticking there on the sediment surface. All right, so clay and some silts have electrostatic forces that bind them together. There's a slide after this that has all the text, so you can like peel through that slowly, go and have a look on the web and that sort of thing. But that's why that line is so unusual. The very fine particles are difficult to entrain. They also have these electrostatic forces that keep them bound into the sediment. So you have very high velocities to move these. You might think back to art class, like, you know, you're throwing a pot and you've got clay all over your hands. You go to the sink to wash it off, and it really takes some effort to wash it off. If you've been playing in the sand pit and you go to the sink, you basically dunk your hand in the water and the sand falls off it. So sand is the easiest of the sediment fractions to remove. And as sediments then get progressively larger, they're harder and harder to pick up and entrain into the moving, that we call bed load, or into the suspension space, which is here. So all these particles in this sort of yellow zone here are being moved around by the current. So down here is the settling out. So it's sort of reverse the previous process. Once you wind down the water velocity, then particles start to fall out. Now, of course, cobbles will fall out first, and then so on and so forth as the particle sizes are progressively smaller. But when you get down here, something interesting happens. Right? Down here, you'll see the line doesn't actually pass through zero. And that means that some particles, fine silts and clays, will remain up in suspension unless some other force acts upon them. And you'll see in the video from Manly, I do a little jar experiment that I shake to put some energy into the system, and you'll see, hopefully, in that the result of this relationship. So the Hjulström diagram, well worth a look at. I teach it to most of my classes and get them to learn it because it's important to understand what's going on in sediments in the systems you look at. So erosion, transport, and then deposition relationships. And if you want to, if you don't get it, ask me. There are like online support materials for this, believe it or not. So there's just a written description of what goes on and what its implications are. There's also a list of things you might expect to find if you look at if you try and compare high energy and low energy environments. I didn't really have that. So normally I would have gone to Point Lookout Australia for a high energy environment, Bradbury's Beach in front of the Moreton Bay Research Station for a low energy environment, and I'd have basically taken you through these various characteristics of the two sorts of sediment. But typically high energy shores, you've got a lot of energy going in there. Because you've got lots of energy going in, that energy is going to lift those sand grains and remove any fine particles. The detritus can get moved. You can't make a permanent burrow because there's so much wave action going on. If you do live there in the sand, you've got to burrow fast, and often you need to be able to swim or move around very quickly somehow. So a lot of the adaptations for creatures living there are to do with swimming. There's not a lot of nutrients in situ, so filter feeding or carrion feeding on washed up material are pretty important processes. No redox layer. I'll get into that, and I'll get into that down here, but basically no redox layer. It means the sands are very well oxygenated all the way through, and small things can live quite deep down in the sands as long as they've got access to oxygen. We'll talk a bit about that. Bioturbation is almost irrelevant. So much has been done by the wave action that, who cares if you've got a bioturbator, basically. But things are very different. Sorry. On a low energy depositional shore, you've got often poorly sorted fine material with very high detritus content often. Things like shells are not washed away and they contribute to the sediment structure. Larger animals can make permanent burrows. So if you've got a low energy soft sediment shore, then they can dig a hole in that, and as long as they've got a hole, a link to the surface, they can draw down oxygen and therefore survive. Carpooling up. So a lot of detritus feeding goes on. There's lots of nutrients in the systems, or deposit feeding, picking nutrients off the surface sediment. There's filter feeding goes on, a bunch of material suspended, so quite high nutrients in the water column. And herbivory is also available as a lifestyle, and not available so much on the high energy shores. The aquatic vegetation is much more diverse. On a high energy shore, you'd probably get some diatoms and things like that. You might get some drifted in algae from outside the system, but on a low energy depositional shore, you've got macroalgae, seagrasses, salt marsh, mangroves, a whole bunch of things, high productivity, and these also have a feedback in terms of resisting the erosion of sediment, slowing down currents, and thereby promoting fine particle deposition. Right, so that's again a Hjorstrom diagram relationship. Now, if you've got these sediments with fine particles, you've got lots and lots of nutrients in them. What can happen is that the bacteria can feed on those nutrients, using up the oxygen until it gets to a point where there isn't enough oxygen to sustain them. And then a group of sulfur-reducing bacteria take over, or groups of sulfur-reducing bacteria take over, and actually drive the sediment, the deeper sediment, anoxic. It often looks black, and it generates hydrogen sulfide gas. So if you've dug down in an estuarine sediment, it smells a bit off, it smells a bit rotten eggsy, and that's what's going on with that. So that boundary between the oxygenated surface layers and the deeper layers is called the redox discontinuity layer, and it's actually quite an important feature, as the next slide will show, because small things have to live in the thin oxygenated surface layer. And therefore, because this relationship is important, bioturbation is really important in low energy depositional shores, because so things that live there are going to be turning over the sediment and then bringing that deeper anoxic stuff up, releasing nutrients, and then driving down that redox layer, making more living room for animals there. So this is the impact of that. This is the redox discontinuity layer. They call it the RPD. I can't remember what they redox something or other discontinuity. I don't know. Can't remember. Redox potential discontinuity is written down there. Tibbets in the caption. Always have a good caption, right? So you can see here we've got fairly well sorted sediments, things like urchins burrowing. There's worms digging. There's a mud lobster digging there, making a hole. there's lots of bioturbation going on. Some things are still living down below that RPD, but they have a tube up to the surface. Now in less bioturbation, maybe finer sediments, again we've got things living up in this surface layer a few centimeters deep, and still some things are able to occupy burrows down in the redox, in the reduced sediment layer. But as we go progressively to increase the amount of nutrients, or find the particles and slow the bioturbation, so things are driven up progressively towards the surface until at a certain point they're almost extinguished. Things have to live actually on the surface itself to be able to survive. You'll see a slide of that. I think a pretty convincing slide of that at Manly. Again, if you want to live deeper, you've got to build a burrow. And in this zone here, it's almost devoid of life apart from bacteria. Just so many nutrients in the system. So check it out. RDL in a depositional shore to me is one of the important features, and very important because of these things. So as life gets driven towards the surface, big things can still build burrows, right? So they can live down in the reducing layer, below the reducing layer. But little things such as these are myofauna, very small creatures that are then forced to live up on the very oxygenated surface layer of the sediment. Things like this is a Harpacticoid copepod, a little crustacean, and they are very, very numerous in the surface of these muds, and they are very, very important fish food. And it's a whole branch of science looking at myofauna, and they're so abundant and they have such high turnover that they're thought that predators can't control them. So you've got a permanent source of fish food there, and that's scattered all across the sands and muds that you will see. There'll be some form of myofauna in there. I'll see if I can diggle some up on a microscope, but if not, Google it, have a look, do some YouTube videos. I'm sure they've got YouTube videos of myofauna. I'll hunt some up. So that's it. There's a few things I want you to know before you started. Down the bottom right corner here, just thanks to Scopamira inflata, the sand bubbler crab, it's feeding and also signaling, maintaining its territory with another crab. It's got stalk eyes, which a number of crabs I show you have got stalk eyes, and I make a lot of mention about the way that crab vision is tied into detecting motion. All right, so the crabs, as we walk towards them, they disappear well before we get near them. But those are the stalk eye crabs. Okay, some of the other crabs you'll see are things like sand crabs. They have short eye stalks, and if you look at the video, you'll see some of them sort of being quite aggressive. Obviously, they're able to key and make some form of images of things that are close to them, and then respond to those. So most of the arguments I make about crab vision and responding only to movement are about those crabs with stalk eyes, where they're not looking at their food, they're looking at predators, they're looking at competitors, and having a great deal of fun. Thank you, Giffy, for the Scopamira thing. In terms of thanks acknowledgements, Shorewalk Companions, Dave Brewer of Brewer Consulting, with Manly, the small child came and helped me, and his grandma at Redcliffe. Tamara Homburg from the Centre for Marine Science for the Nudgee Beach sequences, and my daughter Hannah from the Walter Lab for Wellington Point sequences. Anthony O'Toole has been an absolute freaking star. He's just done so much work on putting together the videos. I'm just so thankful to him. Rob Mackay-Wood's been helicoptering and providing us advice, and also the Moon and the Sun providing tides. That was very nice. And I used a bunch of guides to do this, and also Pro Experience. If you pick up problems, let me know. Give me the video, the timestamp, and then, like, say, Tibbet's an idiot, you should be thinking about this. Or if you see something I haven't spotted, that's even more exciting. So if you see something going on that you think, oh, he missed that, then I want to know what's going on there, then send me the timestamp on the video, and I will go have a look and see what it is. Okay, well, good luck with your exploration of the shores. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I think it's an interesting compromise. We'd really like your feedback on how it works for you, because of course we want to refine these sorts of things. And anyway, good luck, have fun, and basically that's it. Salt.